Welcome everyone to this session. Thank you very much for logging in to hear me speak. I'm very honored and I appreciate it. And I also want to thank Solutions, Hunt Fires, for inviting me to have this conversation. So what I'd like to do is just have a very simple overview of my particular reason for having a very renewed interest in theology, and then we can open the floor for Q&A, inshallah. All right, so feel free to ask questions as we go. So just to quickly introduce myself, I'm not sure if this was done, but I'll quickly do it again. So I have, my name is SHOAIB MALIK. I'm not the cricketer. I'm not married to Sania Mirza. Deliveries at home here. People, they see the name SHOAIB MALIK and it's like, SHOAIB MALIK is here. They ask my wife, is he here? And they said they want an autograph or something. Like, no, this is not the real SHOAIB MALIK. So Malik. My parents are from Pakistan, but my dad was born and raised in Kuwait. I was born and raised in Kuwait my whole life. And when I was 18, went to the UAE. I have a degree in chemistry and chemical engineering, and my PhD was on nanotechnology. When I finished my PhD in 20, I realized that this is not something I want to do. I started realizing that I'm more interested in philosophy and theology and areas of study. So since 2015, I've been on a journey kind of shifting away from the natural sciences, from engineering, to focusing more on Islamic thought. I have three broad research interests, and these are mostly science and religion, atheism, and Islamic theology, particularly Kalam. I've been looking at evolution as a case study for the past 5 years, and this is I chose evolution because, in my humble opinion, in science and religion, this is one of the biggest things Muslims have. So that's why I eventually wrote a book on it. But I think evolution is just a symptom of a broader problem, which is atheism, and that's why I wrote that book in 2000. These are available. If you haven't come across them, feel free to search them up, and you'll find them easy to download from Google. So this is my overview, my background. Currently, I'm at Zayed University in UAE, where I teach physics, chemistry, and math. But outside of Zayed University, in places like Al-Balagh Academy, Cambridge Muslim College, and a few other institutions, I teach modules on philosophy of science, philosophy of religion, and even the interaction between science and religion. So that's my background in a nutshell. Today, what I'd like to do is, like I said, I want to just briefly go over some of the ideas on why I think theology is important for today's conversation. And if we can use that as a foundation, then hopefully we can, have a higher resolution in terms of where and how we might overcome these challenges, inshallah. So let's start off with a basic overview. What are the problems that Muslims are facing today? So there isn't just one problem. There are several issues. And all of these have come the past 150 years. Evolution being one of them. Atheism. Atheism, is an older problem than evolution, but it's still it's the most, I would say, most now. Liberalism, Marxism, scientism, feminism. All of these have variations or ideas that have severe or some degree of conflict with thought. And so the question is, when we are confronted with all these challenges, how do we as Muslims respond to them, right? What makes a Muslim response in comparison to a Christian response or a Jewish response or a Hindu response? Now, to make sense of the world, address these questions, in my personal opinion, you need to have a clear understanding that there are three main areas that you need to part of the conversation in every single inquiry. The first is this idea of metaphysics. So when we want to have an engagement with things like science or naturalism, we need to understand what is the nature of reality to begin with. And more than that, is the natural world all there is, or do we as Muslims believe in something more than that? These are related issues that we need to understand. The second thing we need to be aware of is epistemology. So epistemology is how do we come to understand things and know what are the sources of our belief? How do you know something is true or false? How do you justify something to begin with? And finally, ethics. When we want to address a particular, are more concerns surrounding that issue. So right and wrong, what makes something right or wrong? How do we justify something as right and wrong? So these three things, metaphysics and ethics, form the foundation of every single human being. Every single human being has a metaphysical picture. Every single being has an epistemic picture and an ethical picture. Understand those or not, or whether they're conscious of those or not, is a separate question. But these three are the most important things that form your entire worldview and how you address it towards you. So keeping those three things in mind, metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics, the question is, how does this play a part in Islamic theology? Well, this is where we have to understand the basis of our perspective is God, and then God has given us revelation. And with that, we have developed our own metaphysics. We have developed our own epistemology and our ethical infrastructure. All of these three things, which are needed in a conversation to tackle and engage with contemporary questions and concerns, have a basis in God and scripture in Islamic thought. So these three things that very fruitfully, with ulama like Ghazali, Ibn Taymiyyah, Imam Razi, Imam Maturidi, whatever have you, all these big giants have done this. And that's why we have a very rich Islamic thought. Now, Islamic theology is a very specialized area of study. There are many different areas of study that we have in Islamic studies. So when you go into addressing up Islamic studies as a field of discipline, you will study many things like ulum al-hadith, usul tafsir, all of these are various disciplines that you can become a master in, you can specialize in. Theology, and by theology here I mean mostly aqidah, right? Or if you want to use kalam as a word, you can use that as well. But provides the basis for understanding these concerns, metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. Kalam or aqidah tells you, it helps you address questions, nature of God. Do we believe the same kind of God as Christians do? Do we believe the same kind of God as Jews do, as Hindus do? So those kind of definitions and understanding clarified in this territory. We also have an understanding that God has attributes, right? What are those attributes like? Is he human-like, or is he radically transcendent, tanzihi? So what exactly are God's attributes like? What is the nature of creation, right? So if we believe in a God and we know that, what is the nature of this world? Is it something that is limited? Is it eternal? Was it there always? Is it infinite, or is it created for a short period? Is this the only world? Will there be worlds after this? These kinds of questions are addressed in Aqidah. And then the most important question that we have, particularly between science and religion, is what is the relationship between God and creation, right? So when we say Allah exists and when we say creation exists and Allah created His creation, what does it look like? Is Allah everywhere in creation, or is He controlling creation, or did Allah create creation and step away? So these are various models of how God enters the world. And then also things like ethics play a part of conversation in kalam or aqidah. What makes something good and bad? Do Muslims believe that there is such a thing as or is it just whatever God wills? So if Allah willed that zina is a good thing, will that mean that zina is a good thing now? Right? So these kinds of questions are discussed in kalam. It's all about understanding these kinds of territories. And finally, things like the purpose of life. We have various philosophies today coming out that there is no purpose of life. You define it. Existentialism, Jean-Paul Sartre, for example, he says that we have been created, but we have no purpose. You have to define your own purpose. But in Islam, we have a very different understanding that there is a purpose that is embedded in us from God. How do we justify that purpose? How do we explain that purpose, right? So these kinds of questions, all of these questions, come from theology. Which is why I believe that to engage with things like liberalism, naturalism, scientism, you cannot fully understand or provide response unless you have an authentic, rigid understanding of your theological background. And that's why when I see, for example, people engaging online, YouTube, on forums, Facebook, social media, whatever, most people, when they don't have this, a lot of stuff is borrowed from Christian literature. So, and it makes sense. Current worldwide leaders in terms of combating atheism, in terms of combating Christianity, in terms of combating liberalism, Marxism, whatever have you, the leaders in this field right now are Christian theologians, Christian philosophers are taking this conversation forward, and that is why their works are all over the world. And it is for this. Sorry, somebody said they can't hear me. Can people hear me? Mohammed, hello.
Yes.
You can okay, yeah, okay. Problem just on your side, Hell. So just I don't know, maybe change your microphone. But yeah, so Christians are taking this conversation forward. This is a very sad fact. It's a very, very sad fact, right? If you type in, atheism or engaging with Islam, you'll find thousands and thousands and thousands of books written by Christian theologians, philosophers, scientists. If you type in Islam and atheism, I kid you not, responding to atheism from Islamic angle, there are less than 7 books. Sorry, less than 10 books, 7 in total. That's it. In the English language I'm talking about, in the English language, right? So our production and our engagement is way behind, way behind. And that's why, because of lack of access to materials, I find that most people engage with some of these ideas. Sometimes they borrow a lot from Christian literature. And what the problem with that is that within the Christian literature, sometimes there is Christian physics, epistemology, and ethics that is sometimes borrowed implicitly. And what we end up arguing as Islam sometimes ends up arguing for. So we are in some kind of danger zone, I believe, and there are many problems on why this is the case, right? Why are people relying on this? I think there's a key problem with accessibility. A lot of these works that I'm talking about in terms of Aqidah books and theological manuals are in Arabic. Most of the world, even the Muslim world, most of them don't speak Arabic. Even the modern day Arab does not speak, Fusha. And so that's why there's a disconnect. There are issues, for example, that ulama sometimes are mostly, in fact, this is I would say a general observation. Most ulama and seminary focus on fiqh and hadith. It's a very fiqh and hadith emphasis, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with fiqh and hadith, but there is not a strong appreciation about kalam as a field of study. And this is something that I've observed across the board, whether you are in UK, India, Pakistan, Malaysia, Indonesia, South Africa, US, UK. This seems broad problem in terms of kalam. And because there isn't a strong emphasis in kalam as such, I feel that within the seminary institutions, sometimes we see people don't have a full grasp. There are, of course, a few exceptions. So, for example, Sheikh Saeed Fawda from Jordan, he's one of the leading kalam scholars in the world today. But again, his work is in Arabic. Not many people can access it. Slowly, his ideas are being translated by his students, but that's a trickle effect. So having teachers of Aqidah from A to Z, having accessible works that people can read up and develop their foundations on is hard. It's an uphill battle at the moment. And I think because of that, Muslims sometimes have, again, these are just my personal and general observations, they have a lack of self-confidence, or what they do is that to kind of build their confidence, they lie on, and what are the most accessible works? Christian literature. So this is my personal observation in terms of where the current theological status is of the Muslims are engaging with contemporary problems. Now, in Islam, we have various schools of thought, right? We have our Sunnis and Shi'is, and within each of those camps, we have different schools of these. We have Ash'ari, Maturidi, the Athari, Salafi, Wahhabi school, whatever you want to call them, right? Then in the Shi'i side, we have Zaydis, Ismailis, Ithna Ashari. And so all of these are rich theological systems. They have a very, very rich heritage and tradition. And so we have to identify, if you want to say that this is response, the first question that I usually ask to my students, at least, or people that I'm engaging with, is which school are you talking from? Yani, what is your madhab? What is your perspective? What is your position? You say Islam, Islam has a broad umbrella, right? And now each of these schools believes that they're on the right manhaj, and that's fair enough, and others are completely wrong and they're off the track. So they have their interest between themselves. But when people say that this is the Islamic response based on what I ask, so most people, for example, when I speak to them, normal Muslims, they say, in my opinion, Islam says flan 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 about evolution, or in my opinion, flan 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 about liberalism. I'm saying, from which perspective are you talking about? Are you Shia? And if you're Sunni, which perspective? Are you Ash'ari, Maturidi, or Athari? What is your position? And unless you know these differences, to say that this is an Islamic response, you're speaking in a vacuum. You're speaking from nowhere. So that's why I always stress that when you want to make your position clear, do it from the school of thought that you're coming from. It is very, very important today, particularly today, to kind of make it clear exactly what your theological position is, which theological school you come from, so that the implications of those schools in terms of addressing these become apparent. And so these different schools that I've put up on the presentation slide, they have a rich tradition. So for example, if you take the as more than 1,000-year history, or the Maturidi tradition, similar 1,000-year history, these schools of thought have various thinkers behind them. So for example, Ghazal Razi, Imam Juwayni, Baqalani, and whatever have you, right? So these are well-known ulama across the board, and these ulama, they have several works ranging from simple theological manuals all the way to advanced module, right? So and that's why having a basic aqidah is, the lay Muslim, the average Muslim, needs to know their basic aqidah, which is just Imam Tahawi's creed, and that's it. That's the starting point. But then to build more advanced works, kind of sit with the teacher, go through these ideas, because these are not easy books. These are not necessarily easy books, right? They're very philosophical, they're very deep, and they have a lot of arguments, counter arguments, and time to digest. It took me like at least 3-4 years to understand the mechanics of kalam, right? So but once these are built, once that base is established, once you have a clear understanding of what your theology is, it helps you really firmly understand how you can engage with some of these questions. So my book on Islam and evolution, this is written from a particular school, which is the Ash'ari school, which is the school that I personally adopt as well. And it uses the ideas that Imam Ghazali, mostly in his iqtisad, right? And I say, okay, if you adopt this narrative, if you adopt Imam Ash'ari's work, Imam Ghazali's work, his Ash'ari positions and whatever have you, and if you put this mechanism, so if this is the theory of evolution and this is your theological filter, if you put evolution, how much of this can you accept? And for me, that was a very interesting exercise. Me understand that theology is relevant today as it was 1,000 years ago. Most of the challenge that we see today can be very easily handled with a theological. Otherwise, I feel that these are 50-50 solutions. We don't have fully comprehensive matters. So that's been my experience so far with understanding theological responses to contemporary problems. I just have one last thing to say before I close my presentation and open up the floor for questions. I personally believe that kalam or aqidah has all the answers, and this is something I want to make clear. When the Prophet ﷺ was approached by Gabriel in the form of a man, Hadith Jibreel, he was asked, what is Islam, what is Iman, what is Ihsan? And that hadith for me, it forms the basis, consistent and a cohesive and a comprehensive Islamic worldview. And then he defined what is Islam, he defined what is Iman, he defined what is Ihsan. And if you look at his responses, most of you can characterize them into 3 components. The responses that the Prophet ﷺ gave about Islam are mostly to do with the body, the shahada, the prayer, the hajj, giving your money. Iman is to do with the mind. You have to believe in Allah, messengers, angels, the books, akhirah, fate and destiny, right? And ihsan is to do with the heart. Pray as if he is watching you. As if he is watching you. And if you cannot see, know that he's watching you. At least know that he's watching you, right? So these three: body, mind, and heart, translate into three big areas within Islamic intellectual history, right? The study of the heart is tasawwuf or Sufism. Of the body is fiqh. That's why we have huge fiqh traditions, right? In the Hanafi method, for example, we have the Muqtasa, right? That's a massive book, but that forms a very foundational textbook in fiqh. And kalam is to do with the mind. Kalam will definitely give you a solid rational basis for engaging with some of these contemporary questions and concerns, 100%. Is not be all and be all. To have a comprehensive outlook, it is good to familiarize yourselves and engage yourself in all of this. Because if you do not have a healthy heart, you may not be able to have a healthy mind. If you do not have a healthy body, you may not have a healthy mind. So having a solid basis, three, goes a long way. And this is something that even, for example, Sheikh Abdul Hakim Arad, the operational manager and CEO of Cambridge Muslim College, he mentioned that these three, that balance in the heart, the mind, and the body is a very difficult matter to achieve. And this is some, coming from someone who is, mashallah, at the height of his career and his maturity. So definitely kalam will play a huge role, a massive role, in addressing the concerns and questions in terms of modern engagement about it. But we have to always remember that our being a Muslim is more than just being a theologian. It is having a balanced worldview. And this, I think, is art well by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So I will stop presenting. That was my final presentation slide. I will now hand it over to you guys, to Brother Muhammad Faris, for questions that you may want to have on this particular issue. Thank you very much for listening to me. I appreciate it. I'll hand it over to you, Muhammad Faris.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, SHOAIB. And it was a very huge, interesting session. We had got a lot of insights that the mind, body, heart balance, the highly inspiring. Inshallah, we had some questions from our students. And I will just put it on the order. We can give access to the participants to directly ask the live questions. I think it will be better. Inshallah, I'll start pinning.
Okay, so all right, okay, alhamdulillah. Do you want me to respond? Okay, number one. Why some scholars say that some faith in evolution leads, while those faiths don't contradict any tenets of theology. So, in my opinion, there is an issue with. So there was an interest written by Sheikh Hamza Karamali. If you don't know him, search him. He is somebody who was trained in a Western institution, but then left that behind and went to Jordan, Yemen, and these kinds of places to study Islamic sciences. So he's somebody who is an alim, and has gone through that seminary tradition. And he wrote a paper which talks about the status of the madrasa today. Like what is the madrasa and what is the history of the madrasa? Study the development of the madaris, particularly in the past 300 years. There seems to have been a fracture in the seminary system, in the sense that back in the day, our seminaries were exciting hubs. They used to study everything. They used to study Islamic sciences, natural sciences, a bunch of things all put together. Over was a division. Emphasis started coming on to the Islamic sciences, and natural sciences started getting like a secondary position. And this became further amplified with colonialism and subjugation. So, for example, when the British Empire entered India and Pakistan, or what was just known as India, they started to give apologetics. They started to give da'wah to the Muslims there. Missionaries, Christian missionaries, started to do that. And so, in addition to that, what they were doing is they were setting up schools, and these schools were now rival opportunities against seminaries, because most of the learning took place in seminaries, right? Now, as a result of that, that you have now these schools that are supported by the state, supported by the British Empire, and then you have the seminary systems. And then in addition to that, Christian missionaries are coming to the picture and to the Muslims there. So what did the ulama declare? If you read Tafsir al-Bayan, for example, he says that saying hello or speaking in English, where did that fatwa come from? Why did that fatwa exist? It existed because they wanted Muslims to stop speaking English, because if the Christians knew that they start speaking English, that's the reason why. So, and then that, created this further division, in the sense that people started speaking in the local language and avoid conversions from Muslims to Christianity. And in addition to that, there was also a problem of lacking specialization. Like I said, there was on fiqh and hadith that theology didn't really get the proper attention that it had, a couple of years, several hundred years ago. As a result of this, when people challenges, there's a slight disadvantage sometimes in how they engage with those. Mostly because either they don't understand what is coming, or because they don't know how to engage with this. For most ulama, for example, they'll say evolution, astaghfirullah, haram. This is the common response. Whether you go to Pakistan, Malaysia, Indonesia, wherever you go, this is the common response. Even the instructor at Zaytun just translated a book of a Maturidi scholar into English. In there, he even said that evolution is problem. The key question is exactly how much do people understand evolution to make a judgment call whether this is haram or not, or whether it is theologically acceptable or not. So there's a whole infrastructure with the madrasa system that current ulama are beginning to recognize. Right? They're beginning to recognize. Just yesterday, I spoke to an alim from the UK, who his PhD was on studying seminaries. That was his PhD thesis. It was about understanding that, and he's now writing a book on the history of the madaris Muslim world, particularly India and Pakistan. So, and then he kind of shares these interesting pockets of history where back in the day, more than 300 years ago, specialized colleges for theology and natural sciences, which is very interesting. I found that very, very interesting. But eventually these faded over time. So I think that because they're eventually weakened in areas like Kalam, and the natural sciences became disassociated with the madaris, I think this led to some kind of weakness in terms of how ulama engage with contemporary issues. And so I think that's why there needs to be more help that we need to provide, so that at least we can give them that support and they can give us that support. So I think that academics or people who are in experts in various fields definitely need to speak to our ulama. With that cross engagement, I think we can increase the level of responses and sophistication in our engagement with contemporary issues. So I think there's so many different concerns and issues here that ulama had as a result of the history of the madaris. This is my personal opinion based on my discussion with ulama and just my reading in general. Question? But that will be my response. Muhammad, do you want me to add anything else? Okay. But what possibility of updating ilm al-kalam to make it capable of dealing with modern issues like scientism? So in ilm al-kalam have various degrees of discourses. Yeah. So there are some things that are fixed in ilm al-kalam, right? For example, understanding the nature of God, that will never change. Understanding of God will never change. Understanding of how God interacts will never change, right? So there are some things that are fixed. Other things I think do need to change. So for example, the Ash'ari were well known for atomism. This ontology, this way of looking at the world, that everything is atomistic. Now this was a response and an engagement on artifacts of history. So they were dealing with people like Ibn Sina, hylomorphism, and they were responding to that and that's why they argued for atomism. He said that atomism is a foundational principle of the deen, right? This is Ghazali's teacher. I believe that atomism is not a part of a religiological point that we need to be worried about. because I believe that if you look, the reason why is because it is something that people have developed engagement because of historical interactions with people like Ibn Sina, Al-Farabi, Al-Kindi. But I think that to say that this is part of theology, it is as a basic usul, I think this is wrong-headed, because in contemporary periods our physics has changed drastically. I mean, we have various levels of physical theories, string theories, for example, being the newest one. Now, we want to say that we have developed a theory of the world based on just pure reasoning within, and we want to say you physicists are wrong. I don't think that is the correct way to go forward. I think that atomism, the idea of Jawhar, it was a historical idea, and it needs to move away from this, because otherwise they'll be opening themselves to unnecessary friction with contemporary. It's not a basic base principle of the deen, in my opinion. I say no, it is a basic principle of the deen, but I don't think it's a basic principle of the deen. So yes, there is this discussion going on of Tajdid al-Kalam, right? And in light of the different conversations that people are having today, I think people will have different responses. So for example, a colleague of mine here, so this is a book by Ramon Harvey, Transcendental God, Rational World. He tries to read these works and tries to update Maturidi theology in light of contemporary developments in philosophy and theology. So I do believe that take place, but I think we need to make it clear what our primary beliefs and what are secondary beliefs. And primaries, I don't think can be negotiated. I think they are fixed in stone, in my personal opinion. As there's more than one God, I'm not going to accept that, of course, right? But if somebody wanted to say whether we should believe in atomism or not, I'm like, it doesn't matter. In fact, I have a paper coming out with a friend of mine called Nazif, and we got, Ash'arism, for example, is compatible with various physical theories, that we don't need to stick to one specific area. So is definitely, I think, a work in process. And as for how to address, so I think this is part of the ongoing engagement. I think as we have more young ulama who their feet into kalam, will have more interesting ideas in how they want to engage with things like scientism. So in my book, I deal with scientism. I say that from actually perspective, this is complete nonsense. You can never accept scientism, and I give my reasons for that. Even Harari's Sapianism, which is just naturalism, I think that his book is just an example of naturalism through and through, in my personal opinion. So yeah. So and one thing that on this point that I think we need to be clear, our ulama definitely have done a lot of work. People like all these guys, right? They've done a lot of work, and they penned their thoughts on paper and left them for us to study from. Okay. However, we need to make it clear to ourselves, not have all the answers. Our ulama of the past never dealt with evolution. Our ulama of the past never dealt with things like Marxism, things like communism, things like feminism. And of course, new challenges means that we have to be true to the past. We have to have some kind of commitment to the past's understanding of the world, but yet take it in. And in that process, you will have interesting opportunities and debates. Ulama, that's what makes something strong over time, is these internal debates that are. So I do hopefully think that inshallah in the next maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, we will have a new cohort of Muslims, a new generation of young Muslims, seminary background, that can engage with contemporary issues. And it's already happening. I think we can already see that happening, inshallah. So yeah, let me know. Faris, did that answer that?
Inshallah, I wish to comment on both the replies. First answer was the colonial agenda that you have seen in Egypt, centered Al-Azhar, their imperialism. So that was quite reasonable. And the second answer, it was very interesting, because I also was very confused when we learn the basics of Ash'ari theologies, occasionalism and atomism. But atomism was a response to those who advocated for the eternal Now that time is changed because during the Big Bang theory, people believe that universe has a beginning. So there is no need of proving atomistic understanding
Yeah.
of the cosmos. So we can update those kind of responses to those particular instances. And so the clear distinction between what are the fundamental the this kind of secondary or what we say the not furor, sorry, not as a soul but furori distincted, and we have to find the eligible scholars to update according to the contemporary issues. Inshallah, let's move on to the third question.
What is the third question? I'm just waiting for that. By listening, feel free to put your questions in there as well. Hopefully, we can address them at the end. How does Ash'ari theology differ from Maturidian atheism and naturalism? So I think that in terms of responding to scientism and naturalism, all three will have the same response. I don't think they'll differ in the responses. Where these schools differ are things like, for example, the nature of God. How do you interpret certain verses? Their epistemologies, they differ. I think that's where you will see difference. Not so much how they will differ with regards to modern engagement, but it will be mostly on more scriptural stuff. I feel, but there are different implications. For example, with stuff like evolution. In the sense that because of the way they have slight differences in how they read scripture, they may have different readings on what is and isn't compatible from an evolutionary standpoint. So, but to understand exactly how they differ, this is why you need to study their different. Ash'ari and Maturidi are very similar. They have very minor differences, but I'd say Ash'ari and Maturidi on one hand, which is the Kalam school, and the Atharis on the other, they have, I feel, they have much bigger differences. So we have a book coming out with Rutledge, which I am editing, and it's, I mean, I hope to God it offers, something in terms. But this is a book that, for the first time, in my humble opinion, that takes 8 different schools of thought in Islamic intellectual history. So this is the Maturidis, the Atharis, Hellenic philosophy, the Sufi schools of thought. It takes all of their theories and engages with contemporary science. It will be open access. I was able to get a grant to make this book free. So when it comes out, you can download it for free. And this book will be out in 2023. And so that book will show you the subtle differences between these schools, or sometimes major differences, and how that will impact their conversation. So that will be, I think, a very useful reference for students and theologians and philosophers all around the world. And we're hoping that the language is accessible enough. That's it, inshallah. That's our plan. How can we popularize deep theology? If it can, so I think that you have to bear in mind, to popularize theology, we need to. There are a couple of things here, right? Even in my development, so I started when I was 21. I'm 33 now. I didn't know what Kalam was. I didn't even know what Inshallah was when I was 21. I knew nothing about Islam. I was a very cultural Muslim. When the word Aqidah or theology comes to the picture, the first thing that comes to mind is sectarianism, divisions, fighting, arguments, right? This is what comes to mind. So there is a marketing problem that we have with theology, which we need to think that we need to really kind of move away from polemics in the Muslim circle and just kind of show, okay, theology is important, and this is why. But unfortunately, we still have debates running through. So, for example, the debate between Deobandis and Brelvis, that problem still divides Muslims today, and that can get very heated in discussions. So, and I understand it's an important discussion to be had, but when we make those discussions so public to see, it basically gives people a negative taste that that we are all divided. Muslims have no unity in any shape or form. So I think dealing with that is one step forward in the right direction. This is my personal opinion, all right? And then what if that, in addition to that, I think we then need to show that if you have a theological, it can address a contemporary concern. So one of the things that I think I really enjoy learning from when it comes to our Christian brothers and sisters is that they have amazing infrastructures and infrastructures. They're funded in the millions. We don't have anything equivalent. We don't have anything equivalent like that in the Muslim world. In the States alone, there are several churches, institutions, universities that are backed up by an incredible amount of money. And I think it's because of those learning centers that come together and have fruitful dialogues and debates. And then what happens is once they get students trained up, then they trickle down to the wider masses. Seem to have stuff like that, that infrastructure. So I think getting people who have deep pockets, who are established entrepreneurs in the world, I think we should definitely be reaching out to them for supporting us in this. One of the things that I learned about ulama in Islamic intellectual history is that they had patronage, right? We have lost the idea of patronage today. The alim today is supposed to go to the madrasa, hold a full-time job, manage a family like a regular person while learning full-time, right? I mean, how are you supposed to become the next Ghazali if you're doing all these things, right? How does that work? The ulama of the past, their full-time job was to study. That's how they're able to get so good, right? That was their full-time dedication. So, I think we have an issue of patronage there. And then in addition to that, I would say that having accessible video content will be very good, because I think slowly an erosion of book learning. We are seeing that people don't like books. I'm talking about lay people, majority of the people, because now the culture is iPad, Netflix, and all of that. So I think that this idea of learning from books is slowly becoming outdated. So I think in light of developments, what we need to do is start developing video productions, and very good video productions that articulate very well, these theological principles in the modern world today. And it has to be updated that makes these principles relevant, not something that is abstract and we're discussing a controversy 1,000 years ago. For example, Sheikh Yasir Qadi, he's a very well-known neo-Salafi theologian, right? And he's changed a lot over the past 20 years. He himself, idea that we have to kind of give an appeal to theology that is accessible to the wider audience, and videos and these kinds of engagements are important. I think book, in my opinion, is sad. It's a sad reality for me. I think book learning is gone. Now, I think that ulama definitely need to immerse themselves in their books, but I think there has to be some kind of translation that ulama have, and how it attaches itself to lay people. I think in between, we need smart people that speak both languages, have good and then allow that conversation to cross over effectively. That, I think, is missing. And that comes back to my previous point that we don't have infrastructure.
Inshallah, the point you raised was very important, because when we go through the traditional, we see is these sectarian discussions as a whole part, because that was the necessity of that time. But today we are dealing with scientism, naturalism, and all other, there are many opponents. So if we can produce, a team of scholars can produce books based on theology dealing with scientism and naturalism, the seminaries take these books as their syllabus, then we can for a limit solve these issues. But the problem is, just like you raised, because the scholars have to look their family after, and also do the research at the same time. So the time and money issues very what we can't find any solution for that. Inshallah, next question is about the philosophy of testimony, and I am just pinning that.
All right, okay. What is philosophy of testimony and how it became an accurate way of knowledge? So, philosophy of testimony is simply this idea that we have sources of knowledge not based on logic, that are not based on sense observations, touch, taste, smell, whatever, but they're based on relying on an authority, right? So when I go to the doctor prescribes this medicine once he or she has diagnosed me. And so I am relying on that individual as a form of authority, which is why I trust. How do you rely on that authority? How do you come to trust that authority? This is the philosophy of testimony. That's the study of testimony. And this is basically usul al-hadith, right? If you think about it, the study of hadith, where we go through ilm al-rijal and whatever have you, where you go through the hadith, how do you assess the character of that hadith, how do you test the ranking of that muhaddith, etc., right? That is philosophy of testimony. I personally do not see anything new that is in contemporary circles that we have not already discussed in the literature of hadith sciences. So for me, this is not a new study as such. I think this is already established in Islamic standards. There are going to be some differences, there's no doubt. So there are some interesting books by an author called, I forgot his first name, I think Richard Cody, that's his name. He wrote some books on philosophy of testimony, engaging with these questions. What is testimony? How do you come to qualify testimony? How do you judge testimony? How do you verify, etc., etc.? So I think there are some ideas there, but I think that in usul al-hadith, usul al-hadith is very clear in terms of that this is a field of understanding testimony in of itself. Because remember, if we believe that the Prophet acted in certain ways, people narrated those traditions to us. They narrated how he talked, they narrated how he walked, what he said, what he didn't say. All of that comes down to us through a transmission of, yes? So if we agree to that, then there must be a way of ranking them. And how do you rank them? You must develop a philosophy of testimony. So that's why I believe Usul al-Hadith does cover a lot of discussions of philosophy of testimony cover. Yep, first, yeah, okay, so argued that the explanations of scientific facts is mere interpretations. How you can use, sorry. So in my opinion, if this is talking about, I believe this is a very, very bad argument. I don't believe there are any scientific miracles in the Quran. And I mean, there's a whole lecture back, but definitely I think that we should move away from the understanding that the Quran contains scientific theories or scientific. It doesn't. The Quran has general understanding of general indications of what is out there, but it makes no claims of what people say that it claims. So for example, we have always right with me. I mean, he goes on to stretch a lot of interesting scientific ideas, but they don't necessarily exist, right? People say there's black holes in the Quran. No, it doesn't. People say there are fingerprints. Don't say fingerprints in the Quran, right? There may be indications, but nothing clear cut whatsoever. So I believe this. My personal opinion is this is a very bad approach to arguing for the Quran's veracity. The Quran is not a book of science, and it never claimed to be a book of science. It does have natural indications of certain phenomena, but it is science. And Hamza Sources, for those of you know, he has he works for IRA, and he actually, so his idea that there are scientific miracles in the Quran. Then IRA did a U-turn, and then they came up with the narrative that no, there are no such things as scientific miracles in the Quran. And he has this article up you can read where it clearly shows the breakdown and why we should move away from arguing that scientific miracles in the Quran exist. We should move away from that narrative. He himself stated in one of those paragraphs that the idea of scientific miracles in the Quran has led many Muslims to leave Islam once they realize how weak this issue is. So I personally believe this is a problem of the time, and we should move away from this. There's a history of why this became famous. There's a history behind this. It starts with Maurice Bucaille, Tantawi, and a few others. This is not the time to discuss that. But yeah, this has a historical basis to it. This is a historical basis to it. Well, first, yep. Could you please suggest any institution on science, Islam, and interconnected aspects? Oh, that's a good question. Can I suggest any institution in the world? I mean, uh, so at the moment, there, apart from maybe Malaysia, right? Apart from maybe Malaysia, I don't know university that teaches and encourages research on Islam and science in like any massive infrastructure. I don't trust that at all. And for me, this shows, again, it comes down to my point. We have a lack of infrastructure. I mean, if you look at Christians, they have a vision 100 years, right? They know exactly how many students they want to teach, how much money is going in. That's why they're able to get like people like William Lane Craig, Baylor University, master's programs on science and religion. Imagine a whole master's topic on this issue. We have nothing of the equivalent in the Muslim world. Zero, nada. Because we have no long-term vision about how we want to engage with some of these things. So I personally don't know of any institution at the moment people are looking at Islam and science at this level. There might be one or two in Malaysia. I know of ISTAC, for example, but otherwise I wouldn't know. I can't tell you a name. I can't tell you a single name that does that. So okay, so Salahuddin is asking, have you any plan to start? No, I don't. I need to be diplomatic here. It's not the best place for this kind of work because here things are very sensitive, very, very sensitive. In my own university, somebody got fired and deported for teaching evolution. So I mean, like, that's just teaching evolution. Forget it. So that's why I never publicize my work in the UAE. I always do everything that I do. My conferences, my work, my articles, my publications are entirely in other countries. Money is in other countries. I don't have a single grant with my institution. Everything is abroad. So I believe that if this will start, if this genuinely will construct a movement, it will not be in the East, it will be in the West. Or it'll be in some place like Indonesia or Malaysia. So I know I'm working with Indonesia, an institution in Malaysia. Sorry, not Malaysia, Indonesia, with the Usuluddin department. They are starting programs on Islam and science there. I have also helped Joseph Lombard from Hamad bin Khalifa University in Qatar to develop a program in science and religion. In fact, just a few days about Islam and evolution, and two of the students were from, if I'm not mistaken, Kerala. So I think, yeah. So things are slowly happening, but you think will happen here. That's my opinion. Muhammad Suhail, how can we understand Quranic verse 2130? Because Allah is 2130. So what is? Let me just quickly search that. Actually, Muhammad Faris, can you put that verse on the chat box while I address
I think it is أولم ير الذين كفروا الأرض كانت رتقا ففتقناهما وجعلنا من الماء كل شيء حي أفلا تعقلون أفلا تؤمنون, something like that.
Yeah. So how what I want.
This is linked to implicate there is Big Bang theory explained in Quran. That's the crux of the argument.
Oh, okay, sure. So I think that Allah started, right? We know Allah that started the universe, somehow created the universe, right? But bear in mind that before 1940s, the predominant view in science of the universe was eternal. That was a predominant view. And now we have so it's called the steady state universe. Now we have Big Bang, and now even considered the established science, there are other people who are saying no. There might be something called oscillating universes. So oscillating universes is that the universe starts, it expands, and then it goes again. And so time goes back in and out again. This is an oscillating universe, right? So we might just be in another crunch. Sorry, in another expansion. So oscillating means and then collapse, expansion, then collapse, expansion, then collapse. So you keep oscillating. So that is one now rival theory to the Big Bang. So I like Allah started the universe. There's no question about that whatsoever. But how that may look like, or to put our faith in the, and bear in mind, we don't need science to prove that. In Kalam calls a logical argument is based on that. But to say that a specific verse is talking about a scientific thing, for example, black holes, like these kinds of things. One guy speed of light in the Quran, I'm like, subhanallah, you just made wahi out of wahi. And this, I think, are stretches of the imagination. I'm not saying that. So I think that we have to be very careful in terms of what claims that we are making from the Quran. But that verse is something that is there, even philosophically, that is fine. But I'm talking about people who say that Quran contains the expansion or the inflation of the universe. In the Quran, there's evolution. Where did you get evolution in the Quran from? So this is my concern. And I recommend, again, read Hamza's paper from Ira. Read Hamza's paper. So let me know if that answers.
Yeah, once again,
Yeah.
I just wish to add a point that the people are not started apostating in the name of Quran sense comparison. That's why many of the people accept that comparison. So I think we push that Quran may contain many miracles because it's the word of Allah, and unless we don't know completely about what are the specific miracles of Quran, we have to be skeptic on that. But when somebody says that there is clear-cut scientific miracles in Quran, it doesn't have any proof. So being skeptic and keeping these kind of inspires you, or that strengthen your iman. Personally, many of the Quranic verses personally inspired me. Oh, this is a very modern science. So I keep that verse personally and boost my iman. Don't share to others. Yeah.
Sure. My point is that, so being a scientific, so my problem is when people say they're scientific, miracle means something very specific. Miracle means that the verse is crystal clear. No one had that information at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and therefore this must be a divine, what it means to be a miracle. And Hamza discusses this in his article as well. The problem is that a lot of these things which we claim to be miraculous, that the Prophet ﷺ did not know, is in fact untrue. There were a lot of things that scientific miracles, but people had knowledge of 1,000 years even before Islam. So the idea that, for example, the moon reflects light, right? This is based on one verse, that the sun gives its light, but the light, it doesn't have its own light. People say this is in the Quran, but this knowledge was known to the Greeks 2,000 years before Islam. This knowledge was known at the time, even before Islam. So a lot of these arguments that are argued very strictly that this is a miracle, I would say that these are weak arguments in general. These are not, they don't have a strong basis. I definitely recommend keeping that's the best way forward. But if you want to make a strong claim that this is a miracle in the Quran, I would say then loosen your definition of the miracle. This is my point.
Just
Yeah, Brother Muhammad, go ahead.
Yeah. So the verse of the Quran, chapter 21, verse 30, which deals with do not the unbelievers see. The thing I want to understand is that because the Quran is directly, if a non-Muslim is reading that verse, Allah is bringing an argument. Don't you see, like that were joined together, and the verse ends with then why don't you believe? So that was like I don't know, but that should make this verse is talking about. Like it cannot. Can it be like there's a scope for interpretation. Like we don't know exactly what it is. Like because the Quran is this is the heavens and the earth were joined together, and we have created from water. And why don't they then believe? Like it's like very clear. Then why don't you believe? How do we understand such verse? Because even they today they also say that Quran nothing is clear. It's just scope for interpretation. So yeah.
I believe that verses like that, as Farah said, they inspire. Like that definitely inspires me, because bear in mind that Big Bang was not known at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, right? So how did they understand it? They assumed Allah created somehow together, He compactified us, and then He created the universe and the big heavens in front of us. But they had no knowledge of the universe. In their worldview, probably Aristotle's conceptions that these are just in a circle around us. The idea that the galaxy is huge, that didn't exist in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. That wasn't known. Senate. So I think they understood in a very simple sense that, okay, that Allah, started off with this initial thing and then He created all of this. Now today, in light of modern science, perhaps into non-believers, like how this is very inspiring. But again, I want to make it clear that the language is not strict enough to say Big Bang. Right? Theory that says the universe started 14.6 billion years ago, there was inflation, all of that. That is not mentioned in the Quran. None of that is mentioned in the Quran. The Quran mentions very general stuff in this regard. But this is believe that it gives you a kick. It gives you an inspirational kick. I agree with that.
One thing I also wish to add that we normally ayat into miracle. Actually, it's just indications. So then there is no problem. It indicates there is no miracle.
Yeah, science,
Okay.
science.
Yeah,
S I
fine, yeah.
Y, yeah, GNS.
Hang on. So Niaz is asking, can you suggest someone for getting access to such Islamic science works? Niaz, came up Islamic science works. You mean ideas that talk about Islam and science, or when you say Islamic science, you're talking about ulum, like as what Islamic science here means?
I think he has mentioned.
Yes, go ahead, Niaz.
Oh, can I intervene?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. I just want to know that the science, what I mean is, what I convey is that the basic, the experiments, the methodology of science, all those things,
Oh, you mean like philosophy of
and science means
science?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I can. Okay. Do you have Brother Faris?
I asked that question because, SHOAIB sir, one more thing. We live in Kerala, and you said that there is a lack of institutions right now. So from Kerala, we can access so many sites, especially this kind of your works. We can watch especially through YouTube. Other than this YouTube, is there any other specific locations, these kinds of works?
So my advice here would be that keep an eye out for two journals. The Journal of Theology and Science. That's the name of the journal, Theology and Science. The other is called Zygon, Zygon. These two are the on science and religion. Okay, these two are the big ones. And slowly Muslims have started discussing about Islam and science. It was very weak. Now they've slowly started publishing. So I have, for example, I'm guest editing an issue for them, a series of articles on Islam and evolution. And in this one, for example, we are going to have some. I have written an article with Sheikh Hamza Karamali on the Kalamic perspective on intelligent design. Right? What is the Kalam position on intelligent design? And we are commit ourselves to intelligent design. So those papers will be there. So Zygon and Theology of Science are two of the most amazing resources that you could look into. As the other thing is, I can perhaps send Faris a list of books that he can then pass on to you and anyone else who might be interested. But definitely, generally the best places to be up to date with the latest stuff. That would be the best place. Yes. Did that address your concern? Yes.
Whether these kinds of journals are free, accessible to common mans like us, or is paid journals?
They are paid journals, but there are ways of getting around them. So use what is it called? SciHub. Do you know SciHub?
SciHub. Yeah, SciHub Science Direct, all we know, but some literature we seldom get from.
Yeah. I think that
there is a common flat.
So I'll give you some advice. If you have an article that you want access to, but it's not available on SciHub, contact the author. Directly give you a PDF copy.
Yeah, that we occasionally do with the research gate and all.
Yeah.
But sometimes they are very reluctant. Not in a science academia, the others maybe they will not be bothered about these kinds of transaction normally.
Yeah, it happens. It happens. You should email them on their university website, not ResearchGate. email them on the university website.
Thank you. Thank you,
No
sir.
problem. About Kalam cosmology, question how to approach modern. Can I ask? Yes, of course you can ask, Hasim. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks, SHOAIB. So you were mentioning that the atomism of Kalam is probably obsolete. So my question is about around cosmologies, how the physical theories that we are finding in Kalam. As you mentioned, now we had this kind of Kalam, I mean, atomistic theory about physical world, and then after Avicenna there was hylomorphism, which was coming from Greek philosophy, right? After the advent of so-called scientific revolution, then we had a different set of knowledge about the physical world, etc. And what we called modern cosmology, strictly based on physical theories, right? It's based on the physical world, and there is nothing beyond that. So when we are thinking about a traditional cosmos, even though we say that it is obsolete, it had a place, it had a hierarchical structure, whether we had angels, a place for God. So someone can understand where all these take place. So how do we approach the modern cosmology by probably considering its from a Kalam perspective, by making use of Kalam arguments, probably the atomistic theory in the way it was proposed, or hylomorphism the way it was proposed may be obsolete, but there could be some arguments from that we could take and integrate with the modern cosmology, right? Because I'm asking this question because theologians are now started using Aristotelian framework, or more specifically Thomistic framework to them. So how can we approach this, and what are the useful books that I can refer, because I'm interested specifically in studying this.
So, in my opinion, this question will be addressed in the paper that I'm working on right now with my friend Nazir from Turkey. My personal opinion on, say, cosmology, okay? Cosmology, I think, means a picture of life, right? How do we understand balancing a picture of life? I think the first principle that we need to understand is the basis of Kalam is Dalil Imkan and Dalil Huduth. This is the basic principle of Kalam, that anything that exists is min al-imkan. Imkan, it goes back to wajib al-wujud. Now, anything after that, what is the nature of this imkan? Yani, is it designed? Does it look designed? Is it ordered? This is secondary consideration, and this is where philosophy begins, in my personal opinion. So I believe that, when you're talking about the great chain of being and these hierarchies, etc., I'm like, okay, a hierarchy or whatever, that angels and this and that, it's fine, fair enough. But in terms of a strict Kalam position, the fundamental message is this is all Dalil Imkan. That's all it is. What you want to design or what you want to craft afterwards, I think drifts away from theology. This for me, so I don't read whether the world is atomistic. I don't care whether the world is string theory. I don't care whether there are multiverses or not. Fundamentally, this is it. Now, the reason why Aristotelians are reframing their debate is because Aristotelian metaphysics is heavy. It's very heavy metaphysics, because their physical ontology, their physical metaphysics, is directly linked to their understanding of God. If you believe with the actual potential, you have to believe in actualizer. It's a very strong connection. In Kalam, the basic point is not morphism. None of that matters. The thing is, something can exist or not exist. Khalas, wajib al-wujud. Finish. End of discussion. So that's why their understanding of nature is understanding of God. But for us, we have a very simple metaphysics. If something is, possible, it is min al-imkan. Khalas, you go back to wajib al-wujud. So I believe after that point, how you want to discuss about the nature of the world, whether it's this or that, is secondary consideration. So I don't pay much attention to it. This is my personal opinion. I don't know if I address it. Let me know.
Hello, sir.
Hi.
Sir, I would like to make one point, that is one of the main mistakes that we Muslims make nowadays is that we try to correlate everything in science with religion, right? We really do that, in my opinion, because in my opinion, science does not actually contradict theology, because actually it is two separate ways where there is no clear contradiction. Like we don't have to really correlate every single fact in science with religion. Why are we? There's a problem arising. Can I make one more point?
Yeah, of course.
Like science actually is a changing. It changes. There is no absolute proof system in science. So it is based on the assumption that what happens, what we see in the past, will also take place in the future, right? Based on assumptions. So there is no absolute proof system in science, and it is based on there is only the physical reality, there is only the natural world. So why are we trying to use that branch to define some spiritual aspects? Because science has not can neither disprove God, in my opinion, nor can it prove God. We have to use theology for that. What's your opinion on this?
So that there is a danger of correlation, over correlation. Like we want to put everything in theology. I completely agree with that. That is why in my book, for instance, sorry, please turn off your mic if possible for me.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's why in my own book, for instance, I didn't say this evolution is the Islamic position. I said creation evolution is valid. It's up to you whether what you want to believe. That's your personal opinion. Theologically, both are jaiz. So that's why my starting point in all science religion controversies is theology. I don't dictate what theology can and cannot do. I think some people believe that, and I think that's a form of scientism. So I agree with you that we should not be so hard pressed. And the reason why this has come up is because I feel that science has made so much progress that we feel we need to validate our theology through science. This is the point. This
Exactly.
is, meaning this for me is, I don't know where people came up with this idea, but it starts off with people like Abdul Tantawi in the early part of this other previous, where the idea kicks up from. And Maurice Bucaille, white man savior complex. Oh, the white man says there's scientific miracles of the Quran, and we bought it and we sold his copies. This is how it gets amplified more and more and more in the past century. So I believe that we do not need science to validate theology, but science does validate itself. Without theology, also science cannot begin in the first place. But so I definitely believe that to say that our religion is good because it conforms to it all together. Because even if there are scientific miracles in the Quran, we have scientific contradictions in the Quran as well. Miracles being a case in point, a clear case in point. So how can you say we're science friendly all the way through? So I think we need to have a very agnostic stance. We have to be very clear. Okay, science, this is your job. Do whatever you want to do. It tells us if there are possible correlations, great. But I'm not going to make a strong correlation in any shape or form, because I do not want my theology to bend with the fashion of the time. Sciences, it kind of changes over time. Some things are fixed, some things are strong, so whatever have you. I have no problem with that. But theology should not be dictated by science, nor should it be strongly correlated with science. It's a dangerous road to get yourself into. And this is what, so I've been, I don't know if you can see this. This is my list of books, and here. Oh, these are books on the history of Christianity and science and religion. And what I have learned anything from this tradition, this Christian world, is that they have learned their lesson trying to conform science with the Bible. They have learned their lesson. They said the earth was 6,000 years old. They said that the fossils are to do with Noah's flood. They made several claims. The moon works according to Aristotelian physics. Every single thing was wrong and was heavily debated over, and they learned their lesson not to link their theology with the science. To do the same. I think we need to be very clear about our theological image, make that your first standpoint, and then after that, whatever science says, khalas, okay, no I would really, really advise Muslims not to validate their theology because of science. As for the second point about naturalism, so the function of science is an explanation of the natural, not necessarily a bad point. So I agree with you there. I agree with you insofar that it should not explain, it shall be used to explain spirituality. Spirituality is a immaterial to do with the physical world as such. We can use the physical world. Allah even tells us to look, to be awed by nature and whatever have you, no problem. Allah tells us to do that. And that does give me blessings. For example, when I look outside, I see the stars, I feel something. It feels good. But I will not use science to kind of make claims that are beyond science. And I agree with you 100%. It's not prove or disprove God. And the fundamental reason for that is, as I said before, the basis of ilm al-kalam is dalil al-imkan and dalil al-huduth. If it's contingent, whether it is this or that property or this property, it will go back to wajib al-wujud. Whatever extra stuff that Allah has put in dalil al-imkan, so Allah has made way, He has given us clouds, sun and the moon and earth, whatever have you, fantastic. And we use that and we benefit from that, wallahu, alhamdulillah. But anything more than that, I think, is kind of driven of kalam. Yep. Is that okay for us? Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Dr. SHOAIB, for nourishing our intellect with your knowledge. Apart from today's presentation, I have been from YouTube, especially.
I have been following you, Brother Arafat. You've been following me. I've been following you as well.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you, sir. Your lectures on YouTube, especially in UK and New Atheism and Islam. So firstly, I would like to ask you, do you know of any book written on New Atheism and Islam?
New Atheism and Islam. The only book that I know that does a good, that's a starting point is Hamza's book, The Divine Reality. That's the only book. I am working on because I wrote about atheism to 2018, but I want to have an Ash'ari response to New Atheism. That is something I'm working on right now. I don't know when that will come out, but that is one book I would say is the first book in terms of this area.
Sure.
All right. Okay. Alhamdulillah.
Inshallah, the time has exceeded because Dr. SHOAIB has many.
It's okay. It's okay.
works to
I have
finish.
no problem going further. That's okay.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Jazakumullah khairan. Utilize this remaining time. Inshallah, you can take mic or comment your questions.
Oh yeah. Alhamdulillah. Inshallah. So we have.
Secondly, please,
Yeah.
what I learned from your presentation is how to relate the theology to the contemporary issues. Being a student of in Pakistan, I realized that we have some good theologians who are well versed in traditional kalam and have a strong basis. They can't relate it to the current issues. They teach kalam just as a part of our intellectual history in Islamic seminary. Secondly, you know that updating kalam is a huge project. Is a huge project which requires a budget to grow. While let alone the theology, we don't have enough budget for scientific projects. So it's also a problem.
Yeah, definitely. Inshallah, like I said, there are gems available in every continent. I don't deny any of that. But the thing is, as you said, relaying to the wider audience and having an infrastructure. We seriously lack. I 100% believe that if we had infrastructure in place, right, we can then really do, I think, an amazing job like our Christian brothers and sisters are doing. Like I said, the alim today, what is he expected to do? Teach, learn full-time, have a family and a full-time job. And subhanallah, in the UK, they were really badly criticized. They said, we want an imam to deliver the full prayer, all the 5 prayers, to be a chaplain, so to give dawah and speak to family support, to run the administration committee, to do research. He must have a PhD. In addition to Alamiya. His salary, £20,000. And UK is very little, very, very little. I mean, if that's how much we are appreciating our imams, no wonder we're having a hard time with infrastructure. Social psychology is completely wrong. We need to go back to having established institutes, and only then we can create the next, the next cohort. Without that, everyone is just trying on their own, and it's difficult. It's very, very difficult. It's difficult for me. It's very difficult for me. And you said about that when these scholars, they teach, it's mostly a historical review of kalam in history. My sheikh told me is that we need to take to the museum. This is what he told me, and I've lived by that statement. What does kalam mean for you today? I don't care what it meant 1,000 years ago. What does it mean today? Kalam Jadid, I think, is an exciting opportunity, and I think all of us need to take part in that conversation, whatever support. Wallahu a'lam. This is the way forward, I see. Alhamdulillah. So I think Shanu had a question that I wanted to address. If Greeks prophets, so Shanu, my point was that the skeptic, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the skeptic. If we are so what is the claim that is made? This thing in the Quran cannot be known at the time of the Prophet, therefore it must be of divine origin. Muslims already believe that it's divine origin, right? But now you want that person to be convinced origin. Okay, now the first thing they'll say, okay, if it is a divine origin, one test should be that this knowledge should not have been known at the time or before. What have migrated? That information could have been passed on, right? No problem, because we know the Arabs were in contact with the Persians and the Greeks. We know that. That's where the trading routes began. Let's start from Yemen, and then some went to Iran, the Persian Safavid Empire. Sorry, not the Safavid, the Persian Empire, and then the Greco-Roman Empire. So we know that there were information. So from a skeptic point of view, if you are saying the Quran is divine origin because it explains the moon does not have its own light, think about this. This is what they'll say. This is what the skeptic will say. So go ahead, yes, Brother Shanu.
The reason I asked this question is that the Quran states Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam could have not known the stories of the Prophet other prophets.
Yeah, that's a different claim. That's a different claim. That's not a scientific miracle claim. I agree about stuff in the past.
So they can make the same objection, right?
No, so here, the point here is that when it comes to that part, when about the Prophet narrating stories of previous prophets, that is already established based upon that you believe that the Prophet ﷺ is a messenger, is a Rasul. The atheist that at all. The atheist doesn't even believe in God to begin with. You want him to believe in the authority of the Prophet.
No, I think the Quran uses that, and that is an argument.
Of course, that
Quran could have known this.
Yeah, when Allah makes it clear that he could not have known this, that's fine. But those are in the cases of the prophetic stories. Where is the claim that he had knowledge about things that people?
No, the Quran is using this. This is an argument for the authenticity of Islam.
No, but the verse that you're talking about, where does it say that scientific knowledge is encompassed?
No, I'm not talking about scientific. If you say that Prophet could have not known, if Prophet had access to the Greek knowledge, then what prevents him from not knowing the stories of the Prophet?
Okay, so this is now a different question. The stories of the prophets is something that because they knew the stories, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ, when he was coming, Yusuf ﷺ, for example, he conveyed the narrative to them. He conveyed them based on knowledge that was not based on them, from divine origins. This is within the thematic context of, but I'm saying to use this as a verse to saying that he could not know scientific knowledge, that I think is a gap. Where's the ayah that talks about that part?
Can we say to an atheist that, look, Prophet had knowledge, Prophet didn't have access to the stories of the Prophet, but still he narrates the story, so he's a true Prophet. Can I use this argument?
Yeah, but I don't think it will go very far. For an atheist, I think that will not work at all. Mostly because I think that you are believing in the authority of the Prophet to begin with, in the sense that he may, what's it called? Yeah. So I think it's circular reasoning, in my opinion. I don't think the atheist is you have to prove God exists. Once you prove God exists, then you show that revelation is true. And in my opinion, the strongest way of proving revelation is true is the language of the Quran. Of course, you can use some ideas here that the Prophet ﷺ is a true messenger, he never lied, etc., like the go rap method that Ayya proposes. Let's go for it. Yep, go ahead, Shanu.
Again, again, in order to believe that Prophet didn't lie, we have to rely on hadith, which is narrated by Muslims.
Yeah. So I think that this is for me. It's very easy to argue for God. It's very easy to make them to convince them that the Prophet ﷺ is time. This is what argument is not. I mean, unless there's where some people believe in the Prophet ﷺ like that, no problem. For some, and so the process, I cannot expect an entire lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ in one go to understand somewhat. So for me, I would give them books to read about the Prophet ﷺ, see what people are saying about it, and make up your opinion. That's what I usually do.
We say that when Quran said that Prophet could have not known this, nobody objected. Therefore, it's
yeah, of course. I mean, like, it's not a bad. I'm saying what argument is the scientific miracles. I don't have a problem with this argument. If you want to use that argument, you can. In fact, you can even show that the Quran contains certain things which even the. So you know that there's a difference between. Sorry, say again.
Pharaoh, the king.
Yes, I was about to say that one. That they missed that detail. That for me is interesting. That's very interesting. How did he know that? Right? That's a good argument. But I'm talking about science, the scientific stuff. I would say is a weaker, very, very weak argument.
I agree.
Okay. All right. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Good. So how can we how can you can contact me here. This is my email. Anyone else who may want to get in touch. So do we need to prioritize? Favas is asking, are different taking spirituality separate? I agree with the Favas. I believe that spirituality does not, just like I do not mix chemistry with physics. Why do I need to mix spirituality with physics? I don't understand that. I know that there's some people who mix the two. I don't see any need for that, in my opinion. I believe that you're conflating boundaries. Allahu Alam. So I said your question or not. What else? This session was very appreciated. Thank you very much. So I'm assuming there are no more questions. So Barakallahu Feek for attending. I appreciate it. And for the back and forth. Alhamdulillah, was very helpful for me as well. Feel free to email me at shoaib.acee. Email. Yes, go ahead, Farhan. Yep.
So, can we look forward to more?
Yep, sure. Faris is the guy to, if you want, pressure him.
Inshallah, sure.
Pressure him.
Yeah, but how do we know here?
I'm sorry, say again?
If you are conducting a discussion, how can we do that?
I think Faris can put out an email. Faris, you can manage this?
I think they can access your academic access better.
Yes, that's also very good. That I run academic access. Search academic access, SHOAIB Ahmad Malik. You'll find I interview professors from all around the world. One on Islamic environmental ethics. So that may be something to look out to. Also, contact me on email, inshallah. If you want, we can even organize something else, inshallah.
Of course, sir.
Inshallah. Barakallahu feek, everyone. Inshallah, seeing you again whenever that happens, this life or next life, inshallah. But anything that good came from Allah, any mistake, forgive me for that. And inshallah, barakallahu feek, everyone. And assalamu alaikum. Have a good day, inshallah.
Wa alaikum salam.
Warahmatullah. Thank you, SHOAIB Bhai, for this very interesting session. And I thank all of you to participate in this program, engage with these debate questions and clarifying doubts and opening door to new discussions, inshallah. And a discussion on theology will not end with one session or one human life. It's a process, and inshallah this session may inspire some of our participants to go through these debates further. Inshallah, I suggest to follow Dr. SHOAIB MALIK YouTube page, YouTube channel and Facebook page. Then you can ask questions to him in his weekly academic access program. Comment questions and get his replies. Inshallah, thank you all of you. May Allah receive this as a salih amal. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.